basically, Lojong instruction, which is very much grounded in this paramita of patience, approaches it from two aspects. And for those of you who know the 8 verses of mind training, you will note that there it says that one should always see oneself as inferior and other people as being superior to oneself. So I think that this is something which needs to be understood in context. First of all, Padma Athisha himself was a great scholar, a great practitioner, a great master, and he was very much revered wherever he went. And mostly he was giving these instructions towards monks and scholars and practitioners who themselves were also highly respected within their society. I mean, in Buddhist society in general, and in Tibetan society in particular, monks and scholars and so forth were really the superstars of their society. You know, they weren't interested in movie stars and sports people and the kind of people that usually get media interest in the West. The real superstars in Tibet were the great practitioners and the great scholars. And so they were tremendously admired and revered. And people were very, very devoted to them. And so these were really who Athisha was addressing. His audience would have been, his main disciples who were all very learned, and other monks mostly. The nuns and the lay people were probably outside the temple and just sitting there for the blessing. So he was talking with people who were in great danger of having pride, because they were in a position where everybody really respected them and admired them. And so if they weren't careful, they could end up being quite arrogant. I have always said one of the advantages of being a nun is that nuns can never become proud. But monks can. Not because of the male-female thing, but because they are in a position where people really honor and respect them just for their being monks. So as pride and arrogance, of course, is a very powerful afflictive emotion and very much enhances our ego, which is exactly what we're trying to dissolve. Therefore, a lot of emphasis was placed on putting down the ego and recognizing that so much of what we do is based on the self-cherishing mind, which means the mind which is full of self-concern. And many people, when they meet with others, their main concern is, what is that other person thinking about me? Do I look all right? Did I make a good impression? And so forth. And so in those cases, one is putting the self up, and the other person is merely the mirror for oneself. So this is what Athisha was talking about, I think. It's not in our present society where so many people already have very low self-esteem. It doesn't help just to think, oh, I am low, in the sense of I am insignificant, I'm inferior, everybody's better than me, I can't do anything, I've never been able to do anything, I'm really stupid, I'm really hopeless, or everyone's more important and I'm nothing. and so forth, because this is also ego. In Buddhism, in Buddhist psychology, actually pride is defined as thinking we are better than others, that we're just as good as others, or that we're inferior to others. In all cases, it is self-reference. Really, is giving ourselves that when we and we just see others, not in reference to me. What the others are saying. Stands in the way. We judge everybody from our own. His whole of neuroscience so often these insights, so that the scientists and His Holiness are conclusions. You know, the scientists say, but how could you know that without your machines? And His Holiness says, but how could you know that without meditating? And so both sides are amazed that they've come to the same conclusions. But of course, for His Holiness, this is very important. You know, Buddhism is not at all anti-science. It's very fascinated by the discoveries from this point of view, because it ratifies so much of what there is. And raising everyone else up, and the overcoming our self-cherishing attitude. So His Holiness was talking about it with a group of neuroscientists and psychologists. And Your Holiness, low self-esteem. Why, after all, you know, that they went through after the Chinese invasion, and then they became exiles in India, which was such a different culture, and they also had experienced their family members being killed and imprisoned, and all the traumas of trying to escape. Nonetheless, when they got to India, despite, you know, their grief at leaving their beloved country and seeing everything which they valued so much trashed all the monasteries destroyed and, you know, the monks imprisoned and killed, still they had an inner joy. It was really very interesting to see them. And people who worked with professional refugees really had never come across refugees like this. They were cheerful, living in tents made out of bulgur wheat sacks, and you know, crushing stones for the roads in high Himalayan areas to make a living. But they were cheerful. They were very generous, they were very open-hearted, they had so much faith. And of course they were so happy that His Holiness had gotten out, and many of their great lamas had gotten out, and that was so important for them. So they had that sense of inner security and inner worth. And this is why His Holiness was so surprised to hear about low self-esteem, because on the whole, Tibetans don't suffer from that. I mean, nowadays they do. The new generation, of course, is very conflicted. But the older generation really had that sense of inner, I don't know, inner well-being there, and tremendous devotion. Tremendous devotion. So they didn't think of, so if one wasn't careful, that would spill over into arrogance. If you see, a basic sense of well-being, of confidence within themselves, a real belief in Buddha nature, even if they were just nomads and illiterate. They still had that sense of they were very balanced people, actually, despite, you know, their society, which was very feudal. But nonetheless, they had a sense of something inside them which carried them through all the traumas which they later experienced. So this idea of really not liking yourself, not being comfortable with yourself, that's it. They were comfortable with themselves. And that sense of discomfort that so many people feel, and a sense of really not liking themselves, and suffering from low self-esteem as a result, that of course is still ego. I mean, I have often said, you know, the ego is perfectly happy to be miserable. Because if we feel sorry for ourselves, if we think we are, you know, if we become victims of our suffering, then that is the ego sitting there, you know, feeling absorbed in itself and its own suffering. And this is why, again, we need to transform our experience of grief and suffering into opening up the heart to feel, therefore, that sense of compassion for all others who are suffering as we are suffering. But if we don't do that, then it just becomes interned, and we are endlessly thinking about poor me. And that's the ego, perfectly sitting there, gloating on feeling miserable. So when it comes to this point about the perfect patience is to see ourselves as lowest of the low, it doesn't mean that from the point of view of just developing low self-esteem. It just means that we just stop putting ourselves always at the center of everything. We can stand aside and allow everything else to be more important than necessarily our role in the middle of it. So when we meet others, they are what is of primary interest. We listen to what they're saying. We hear them. We don't jump in immediately with our ideas, our thoughts, and how they are relating to me. We're out the way. The center stage is the other. And that's what he really means by putting ourselves down, up to the lowest. The lowest as far as our interest in that moment is concerned, because what we're really interested in is the other. And so what it really means is the lowest in the sense of our importance and our attention. Our attention is not on ourselves at that moment. Our attention is on the other person. So this is a patience insofar as the other aspect of patience, which comes up very much in this Lojong teaching, which derives from Athisha, is the fact that we really need challenges in order to grow spiritually. We tend to think that when everything is going very well, everything is very smooth, no problems, no difficulties, everybody very friendly and kind, everything going the way I want it to go, that is the perfect scenario for practice. And of course that's very nice, and is considered from a Buddhist perspective to be the result of, very favorable causes and conditions. And for a time that's very nice, but in the end it's like we don't really learn much, because we fool ourselves into thinking that we're much more spiritually advanced than we are. Look how friendly we always are. But then it's easy to be friendly with people who are friendly. And it's nice. I'm not saying to go out and only meet with people who are unfriendly, but that's very nice, but it's like lying out on the beach all the time. That's very good, but we can't spend our lives lying on the beach. We will just end up, being unable to walk, really. We will definitely end up very flabby. And so, in order to strengthen our muscles, we know we have to exercise. We have to, people go to gymnasiums and they face all these formidable machines which are designed to be, challenge our muscles. And likewise, in our spiritual life, we need challenges. We cannot learn patience if there is no one to annoy us. Right? And this is why living in society, living in families and with our work colleagues and in our social life and within our society can often be the ideal place to really develop these qualities. Because while you're in isolation by yourself, what patience do you need? You get annoyed with the crows because they're cawing. By the way, what are those at night there are these kind of, whoa, 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 whoa. Are they jackals or are they... Coyotes, really? Jackals. So, you're trying to meditate on your shinny and the jackals are going, whoa, 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 whoa. So then you say, oh, well, never mind, just jackals, you ignore them. That doesn't help your patience. But if you've got a neighbor next door who's playing loud rap music when you want to do your loving kindness meditation, now that's a challenge. And so instead of being all upset and irritated and how inconsiderate our neighbors are, we can say, oh, fantastic. Wow, thank you, you're so obnoxious. Now I can really start practicing. I need some more patience. Now this is the time. You're helping. So in the Lojong text, there is a lot about people who harm us, who do, especially when we've helped them, and then they turn round and as we say, bite the hand that feeds them, and so forth. That pain that comes up with people who are unkind to us, criticize us, cheat us, instead of just reacting by being upset, self-pitying, or angry, we can feel gratitude, because they are training us in this very important quality which is needed on the path, which is the quality of forbearance, tolerance, and patience. So in the Lojong text, there is a lot of emphasis on this, because it's something everyone experiences. And either we can get all upset and angry, or, as I say, self-pitying, or we can take it on the path. And so a lot of the Lojong emphasis is on taking everything onto the path. Nothing is an obstacle, everything is an opportunity. If we get sick, great, we'll do Tonglen. If people are difficult, great, then we'll learn to become more open and forbearing. It doesn't mean, I should mention that, it doesn't mean that we just allow people to cheat us. Doesn't mean that if we're in an abusive situation, we allow people just to abuse us. We can stand up. We can defend ourselves. We don't have to be stupid. But it's a matter of the inner attitude. Whether we respond with anger or with compassion and patience. So we can be very strong, we can stand up, we can oppose. But the inner attitude, where is that coming from? Whether it comes from inner strength of our forbearance, but saying enough because you are creating a lot of bad karma, don't stop that. Or whether it comes from just our self-cherishing mind, which just gets angry and upset and so forth. So the question is not to... People imagine that if we are patient, that we are weak. But actually, genuine patience is a tremendous strength. Only a weak mind wants revenge. A weak mind, you hit me, I'll hit you harder. That's weakness. Strength is when we do not just have this, push-button reaction, where we stand back and look at the situation and respond skillfully. And I mean, it's very important to recognize that, despite, again, being in disharmony with the world, the media, the movies, and everything presented that if somebody kicks you, you kick them harder. And that makes you a superhero. But that is not so. That is not so. And it's very important to recognize that a genuine strength of character comes from the ability that no matter what people do, from our own side, we will not retaliate by reflecting their own unskillful states of mind. So this quality of patience and forbearance and tolerance is a very important spiritual quality, which is why it is one of the paramita. Because it's so easy for us to feel self-justified in being upset and angry and wanting to retaliate. But that just creates a cycle, as you all know very well. As the Buddha said, hatred does not cease with hatred. Hatred only ceases with non-hatred. Otherwise it just goes on and on, round and round and round. You hit me, I hit you, you'll hit me harder, I'll hit you harder, and never can stop until we say enough. Let's try a different direction. So this is on a national level, it's also on a personal level. each one of us is responsible for our responses to the challenges of our life. How we respond is up to us. We can respond skillfully or unskillfully. So this paramita is a very important one. When something annoys us, how do we respond? And, even if at first we respond by feeling irritated or upset or, wanting to get our own back, okay, but then we have to examine that. We have to look at that and think, no, that's really not very skillful. What is a better way of doing things? And then we learn. This is how we learn. If people don't upset us, how are we going to learn not to be upset? So this is why in the Lojong texts it always says that the people who harm us are our best spiritual friends. And that even we should put them on top of our head, like the Lama, and recognize this is a great teaching here. Now, how can I learn from this? This will strengthen me inside. Without this, without opposition, how are we going to learn? This is very important. And I think because of these Lojong teachings, which were then taken into all traditions of Tibetan Buddhism, it really helped people a lot when they were faced with very, very challenging situations. They immediately began to remember these slogans. Like His Holiness the Dalai Lama says that, of course he knows the 8 verses of mind training by heart. And when he wakes in the morning, that's the first thing he recites. Because it sets the tone for the day, that whatever happens, and however difficult things may be, we're going to transform it and use it. It's like compost. You put it on the garden, and all that rubbish helps the good plants to grow. You don't throw the compost away. So this basic underlying principle that whatever happens to us, whatever circumstances come, whatever people we meet, whether they, from the ego's point of view, seems favorable or unfavorable, all of it can be used. Everything can be taken on the path, becomes the path. So this paramita is a very important paramita. It's something also especially important because it's something which we use in our daily life. It's not just something for when we're sitting on our cushion. In fact, sitting on the cushion is probably where you don't need it so much. But in daily life, dealing with other sentient beings and dealing with the circumstances of our lives, this is when we can really learn how to acquire this very important quality. So therefore, as I say, instead of resenting our daily life, we can recognize that our daily life is a perfect place in which to practice, especially certain qualities like generosity, ethics, patience. We need a society within which to practice these paramita. And so it's very important to not equate the Buddha Dharma just with meditation. Of course, meditation is important, but it's only one of the aspects of the path. It's not the only one. And merely being able to center your mind or even gain insight into the structure of our consciousness in itself will not completely create the causes and conditions for total enlightenment. We need all these other facets too. It's like a diamond which has many, many faces, and they're all shining, not just one. So therefore, what I'm trying to say is that this particular paramita is very important in our daily life. It's not, people say we have no time to practice, but that is by narrowing practice into when we sit and we do our meditations and chant our prayers, that's practice. The rest of the day is just, worldly activity. And Tibetans sometimes talk like that, but that's because they're talking to monks. But in actual fact, if one looks at the texts, one can see very clearly that many of these qualities needed on the path are ideally cultivated within society. And it's, if we sit beautifully in meditation, but then if somebody comes and disturbs us and we feel tremendous anger and irritation, then, what's the point? And so this is very important to recognize that there are so many things which we need to carry with us all the time. I mean, even driving in traffic and so forth, when people cut in front, I don't know, of course Israelis, I'm sure, are very good drivers. But in India, it's a great challenge. And so instead of being upset and angry that people are driving so dangerously and without consideration, one again, are grateful because, certainly driving in India, you have to be mindful every moment because everything's straying onto the road, not just cars, people, cows, goats, dogs, anything, without looking. And also you never know what the car in front or behind you is going to do because they're not going to let you know. They like it to be a surprise. So either one can drive feeling very frustrated or angry, or as most Indians do, just relax and genuinely go with the flow. Because that way, you can enjoy it. If not, and so through the driving the car of our life, this is also it. Yes, we have to be alert to what other people are doing and what's going to appear on our path, but to do it from a state of relaxation. And at the same time, alertness. So that when things do come in our way that are not supposed to be there, we don't get all upset and thrown off. That we are able to just have a mind which is open and expansive enough to include everything. Not like a drum, with a very tight surface that every little tap resounds noisily. It should be something much more open and spacious. Our mind. Clear and alert, but that spacious, so that when things do come up, it doesn't hit us so hard. We can allow things to manifest and then to dissolve again. So this quality of forbearance is a very important quality to cultivate in our daily lives. And not to get so upset and uptight about everything, that everything isn't going the way I want it to go. And that people are acting the way they're going to act. They're not going to always do what we think they should be doing. Why would they? So then, of course, again, he's playing. I really think he has a sense of humor about this whole thing. The supreme effort is letting go of activity. So again, what does he really mean? What doesn't mean you know, when we think of making effort, we think of being very busy and doing lots of things. And as long as we keep busy, we feel we are being diligent. And then we feel, you know, good about ourselves because we really worked hard. Often this also happens when people go into a retreat. They feel that, you know, to be in retreat, you really have to keep working at it. So they you know, are very energetic and, you know, millions of mantras and all these sort of activities, really pushing. Because if you push, then it shows you're being diligent. And so what he's saying is just relax. And I think that this is especially true for meditation practice. Because, and I'm assuming here really he's talking about meditation practice. That, you know, we think that the harder we try, the more things we do, the further we're going to get along. But it doesn't actually work that way. And often people who try too hard end up with something which in Tibetan is called lung, which is a disorder of the internal energies of the body, the prana. And this results either in physical problems. Some people get really very strong physical reactions, or headaches and so forth, or psychological breakdown, which then is a big impediment because you can't do any formal practice at that point. You have to. The only advice is to stop practicing and just relax. And so it's because what people are doing is to plug into our usual idea that we have to work hard to get somewhere. So, like, you know, in your everyday work, you know, you have to, you know, work hard, keep going, you know, put in a lot of effort, and then you'll get something from it. And so much of what we do in our life, especially nowadays, is very goal-orientated, right? We've got to work hard, we mustn't relax, we've got to keep going, and then somehow we will achieve. And so if we take that kind of attitude into our Dharma practice, then again it becomes, got to work at it, mustn't stop. The harder I work, the more mantras I do, the more teachings I attend, the more books I study, somehow or other at the end of all this I'll get something. And so all it does is to plug into this very egoistic stream of, I'm not okay right now, but if I really work hard, somehow I will achieve and get my goal. Am I making sense here? The thing is, it's sometimes the texts are written in that way, as if here we are, ordinary, flawed, ignorant, sentient beings. Buddhahood is over there, the shining Himalayas. So we have to plod along the path, carrying a very heavy rucksack of all our commitments. And somehow or other, eventually, if we keep walking hard enough, eventually we'll start climbing up the Himalayas. It doesn't really work. And I think this is what he means by saying that the highest effort is to stop trying to do anything. We don't have to do anything, we have to become. We have to recognize who we already are. And this, of course, is the basis of Tantra. This idea that we are flawed sentient beings, but eventually, if we work really hard, we can become a Buddha. In the Tantra, it was understood, in the Vajrayana, it was understood that we already are Buddha. All we have to do is recognize that. So therefore, in the Vajrayana, you see yourself as the deity. You see yourself as the Buddha right from the start. And you develop what is called the pride of the deity, which means that you recognize that from the very beginning, this is our true nature. We really are Chinrezig. We really are Tara, of course. We identify with all the wrong things. And this is our tragedy. So that during the practice one sees oneself as Tara, one sees of course all other beings as Tara. Not just me, I'm Tara, everybody else is just flawed sentient beings. All beings are Tara. But the essence is to relax into that understanding of one's true nature. And also in meditation, this is why it's very important to meditate from a state of the mind being very expansive and relaxed. Because we're trying to uncover our true nature. We're not trying to build something up. We're trying to relax our sense that there is something to attain. And recognize that since the very beginning we already have it, we just don't recognize it. Therefore, always pushing ourselves, ends up, as I say, often being very counterproductive, because we end up, especially in this day and age, more stressed out. Instead of unstressing, we end up more an extra stress. Now we've got to become not just the CEO of our company, we've got to become a Buddha. So when we practice, it's a matter, as we said before, of letting go, of dropping. Just letting things drop and being with the practice. It's like any skill. If we take as an example music. Now, to become proficient, of course we need to practice. If we over-practice, we will just get exhausted, and it gets worse and worse. But a certain amount of practice is needed. I'm not saying we don't need to make an effort, but if we over-effort, then we end up not being able to do anything. So we can pace ourselves, and we practice, and we practice, and we practice. And eventually, the music takes over, so that a great musician, the music plays through them. And when they drop their ego, then that is when they really perform great feats of brilliance. As long as the ego is in charge, it doesn't work. They just play very well, but they're not playing brilliantly. And so sports people, all these people know, yes, you do need practice, but in the end, you have to drop it and allow for this something much deeper to take over, which is not governed by the ego. So likewise in our practice, yes, of course we do need to practice. And we do need to make efforts. He says, let them go of all activity. But yes, we do need to make efforts. But nonetheless, we must be careful not to create just another goal for the ego. The ego sees itself as being enlightened, as being a great bodhisattva, as being spiritual. And then the spiritual path becomes just another matter of making a bigger, more wonderful, more spiritual me. But it's not about that. It's about dropping, dropping, dropping. And the easiest, simplest way to let go is to relax. And not do anything. Just be. That's the highest effort. To be effortless. But indeed, it takes quite a lot of effort to become effortless. So he's talking about the highest. The highest effort is to be effortless. Basically, that's what he's saying. But it takes. It's true. I mean, there are teachers who come along and say, "Oh, there's nothing to do." You know, the doing in itself creates an obstacle. That, you know, just recognize your true nature and that's it, nothing, you know. And this is true. But a while back I was discussing with the Vipassana teacher called Jack Kornfield. And he was saying, now I'm really confused. Because, you know, on the one hand you have the teachers who say you've got to throw everything into it, make tremendous effort, moment to moment to moment. And then you get the other side who say there's nothing to do, just relax, and it will all just manifest, you know. He said, I don't know. I mean, and he, who is a great Vipassana teacher, said that. I was quite surprised. So I think it's the middle way between extremes, as always. That yes, we do need to make a steady effort. Of course, we're never going to accomplish any skill if we don't make an effort. But nonetheless, it should not be a goal-orientated effort. That we think we've got to get somewhere. Because actually where we are is exactly where we should be, we just don't recognize it. That's our problem. It's not that we have to become something else, we just have to recognize who we really are. So we need to put some, you know, some effort into that. You know, to learn how to sit properly, how to relax the mind, just letting things become much more open and expansive, and learning how to look inside at what's really going on. That takes some effort, but at the same time it's very important not to think that the more we push ourselves, the further we're going to get. Because if the ego is in the driving seat, then the ego is going to go along a path to deeper gratification for the ego. And I think that this is one of the criteria for all of us who are trying to practice. At a certain point, to to ask ourselves, with all this effort that we're putting into trying to really develop the path, is our sense of self becoming, it was gradually, slowly dissolving? Or is it becoming more rigid, more hard? Because people can become what they think is very, very spiritual, but actually it's all based on their sense of me as a spiritual person. And that is exactly what we're not trying to do. Am I making sense here? I'm sorry, I'm sort of rambling, but I'm working with this whole... It's a delicate balance between, yes, we have to make effort, but at the same time it shouldn't be totally ego-driven with the idea that by making effort we're going to get somewhere. That where we are right now is not good enough. We need to, we have to become a super me. That is where we go wrong. It's not a matter of shining, polishing the ego. That's the point. It's not a matter of polishing the ego. It's a matter of gradually dissolving the ego. And so all of these practices, all of these qualities are helping us to become released from the tight grip of our self-cherishing mind. And if they don't, if they just make a more shining, bright me, however much that might be admired by other people, it's not the point. We have just prettied up our prison. We haven't escaped from the prison. So therefore, although we have to have perseverance, patience and perseverance are the essence of the path. It must be a wise perseverance, a wise effort, which doesn't increase our sense of self, but helps to slowly release our sense of self. Do you understand? So therefore, it's where he says that the highest effort is to let go of doing anything. What I think he means here is just that, ultimately we cannot attack the citadel of enlightenment. It's not like that. If we get up all our battle forces, somehow or other we can overrun it, like crusaders. It's not like that. It's a gentle releasing. So therefore we have to be careful that our spiritual path doesn't just become something which ratifies the very thing we are trying to see through. So it's this balance, yes, of course it doesn't mean we don't do anything. Naturally, we have to make efforts, but it's not an effort which is driven by our sense of wishing to, the ego should achieve something.
The word for action here is not karma.
No, it's not, it's chawa. It's not le. It's chawa. Chawa means doing. It's very clear. Chawa pong, it says. Letting go of doing. If the questions are relevant to these two paramitas, then I'll take them. Otherwise, please don't ask questions.
I'm just wondering.
Because as you can see, somebody from Mexico remarked, "Don't the Israelis have a lot of questions?" Yes, dear.
Is it possible that all these texts also point to the direction of the nature of the mind?
Oh, yes.
All the sentences can look from this point of view, and then...
Yes, of course. I mean, ultimately he is pointing towards the nature of the mind. But he, and this is what he's saying when he said there's nothing to do. You know, the greatest effort is to stop doing things. Because, you know, he's talking, I think, especially perhaps about our practice, that we think that doing and being endlessly busy will accomplish something. And so he's just saying, just, you know, let it all drop. Just be. So this is a very important, I think, what he's saying. And it's something which you should go away and take these slogans and really think not just what I'm saying, but in general what it really means to you, what these slogans are talking about. Because everything, especially these paramitas, he's turning them on their back. You know, he's not saying what you would expect him to say. He's saying, just turning everything around. And it's very profound what he's saying, actually.
Could you talk a little more about the one developing patience? Because, for example, I moved into a new place a few months ago, and it turned out to be extremely noisy day and night, and the neighbors are horrible, and they have trucks and tractors and whatnot all day long and all night long. In the beginning, I told myself, well, I'm too sensitive, and this will be kind of the opposite, so I will work with it. And it turns out that I'm just so frustrated and fed up with it, I can't bear to be in the house. I just do anything to avoid going home.
Okay, so she's talking about patience. She's saying, for example, she's moved recently into a new area, and there it is extremely noisy day and night, and the neighbors are not friendly people. And at first she felt, well, you know, I will use this as my practice. I can learn, you know, to live with it and be more patient. But it's just too much, and she feels very frustrated by the whole situation, so that she doesn't even want to go home. Well, I mean, again, these instructions are for 8th level bodhisattvas. And we should, of course, be aware of our own limitations and where we are at. It's good that you felt I really should be able to develop practice and take this on the path. So that understanding that would be very, very best is good that you felt that. If you nonetheless it's too much, then I would say just move. I mean, you know, it's not that we are inviting suffering, you know, but if it comes, then we try to deal with it. If we really cannot deal with it, then we have to work out what to do about it. I mean, we're not just beating ourselves up for the sake of beating ourselves up. If one can develop the ability that one is totally indifferent to the neighbors, as many people who have been brought up in very noisy neighborhoods are often very indifferent. I mean, Indians, for example, love lots of noise. They feel challenged by silence. But my feeling is that if you have a choice and you really do find it so difficult that you can no longer even, enjoy going home, and it's incessant because you say day and night, then try to find somewhere quieter. And then, when things are, annoy you but are less in your face and challenging, that you can, work up. It's like if you're practicing bodybuilding, you have to start with small weights and build it up. You don't start by trying to lift trucks. You start with smaller weights, and then that develops your muscles until finally you can take on very heavy weights, and it doesn't seem any challenge anymore. What do you think, Boaz? What would you do?
Teach the neighbor Buddhism.
Get them, yes. How about organizing shamatha classes?
I would try to the point that I will do.
Yeah, I think this is it. I mean, if you have tried, and at least you know that's how you should be acting, but it really is too much, then I think it's logical to say, okay, there are other things in this world apart from learning patience with noisy neighbors. And so, I mean, that's no problem. I mean, I don't think you should then, feel that you've, you've been defeated. You just, we have to look at our capacity, our abilities, and assess ourselves, and do the best we can, and then, work within that.
It's like with the killing that you talked yesterday. There is a limit to what we can do now.
Yeah.
It's more the question of the mind that we keep after doing.
Yeah, we aspire, but as I say, these are qualities which are the ideal, right? This is the ideal. This is where we are hoping eventually to come to. In the meantime, we cannot always manage that, but it's okay. That's fine. We know what we should be doing, well, we can't do that, okay. Never mind, we keep practicing. And not to recognize that so many of these, these qualities which are explained are as I say, they are how we would be if we were enlightened. Just as in the ethics, in the text it says, just as the arahats naturally keep all these ethical codes, likewise I aspire to also try to keep these ethical codes. So we're taking the how we should be as what we're aspiring towards in all of this. We can't do it because we're not there yet, but this is where we want to go. This is the point, that we appreciate that, a genuinely enlightened being, this would be spontaneous action for them. But for us, we still have a ways to go. So, this is just giving us how a next level bodhisattva would naturally act. And we shouldn't worry too much that we can't get there yet.
But we really encourage people to write. So.
Yes. So now we're going to deal with these questions here, hopefully.
We'll print a book with the questions that are.
המזגן פה דולק? אם כן, אז אפשר לסגור?
לא דולק.
לא דולק? נורא חמור.
אפשר לסגור? אפשר פה.
שם חם, איפה? שם חם.
I don't know, but she begs me to answer this one, so I'll answer it. For women, so she's saying basically, she's been trying to tame and, pacify the mind, but certain times of the month she has a problem, and because of presumably imbalance of hormones, she finds the mind very wild, and what to do, basically. I would say, relax. The thing is not to make a big deal out of all this stuff. If at that time, still sit. It's very important in our practice that we do not judge our session. So that when the mind calms down and is quiet, we think, oh, that was a good session. When the mind is very wild and out of control, we say, oh, that was a bad, useless session. Very important not to judge. The fact that we are sitting, doing our best, whether the mind is calm or whether the mind is wild, doesn't matter. Okay? The important thing is no excuses, sit. People write essays. Did you sort them out? Okay. So this is a good question. This is. I don't know the answer, but it's a good question. You say that these paramitas, such as ethical behavior and so forth, are also necessary for achieving enlightenment. And yet, we are told that to achieve enlightenment, we must realize emptiness through meditation. This seems to me two different aspects of existence. Can you explain the connection between them, and how does ethical conduct aid us in realizing emptiness? So here, the thing is that there are two things which are needed for gaining enlightenment. One is wisdom, and the other is what is called skillful means. Upaya. And they are considered to be upaya or compassion, but upaya here. They are considered to be the two wings of a bird. It's never said in any text that only wisdom. It is always understood, maybe in scholars' books because they're only thinking wisdom. But in any practice manual, it is understood that we need the two. One is wisdom, which we gain through meditation and through a realization of emptiness in the nature of the mind. But the other is the upaya, the skillful means. And that is all the other paramita. Generosity, ethics, patience, and so forth. These two are needed. It's not just one-sided by any means. We not only need wisdom, we also need the positive qualities called sonam, or merit. Without that, we cannot get through to a genuine experience of wisdom. They back it up. In the West, people don't talk about it very much, but in Asia, people are very conscious that the reason, and it comes, we see it when one does the preliminary practices, the mudra, that it's understood that the reason why we have problems in our meditation, the reason why we have problems in developing wisdom, is because we haven't got enough positive energy, that we have the negative energy, which is why they do purification like Vajrasattva, but also we need to make lots of, it's like having very good quality petrol in your car. If you don't have enough petrol, then it's not going to go. Or if you have to recharge your batteries. I mean, the point is, it's this very, some people, they just, everything that they want to do, they want to practice, they want to study, everything comes together. As they aspire, it all comes together, it all falls into place. Other people, no matter what they do, they have problems. When they try to study, they don't understand, they don't meet the right teachers, there are always other things happening which create impediments on the path. And from a Buddhist perspective, that is because those people who have, difficulties along the way continually, even though you want to take your difficulties onto the path as a good Lojong practitioner, nonetheless, for some people it's much easier, for some people it's much more difficult, challenging not only externally but internally. And when we have endless internal or external hindrances, it's considered because there is not enough positive karma. That it's like we don't, our bank account, our merit bank account is in arrears. So everything becomes difficult. And it's considered very important that therefore we create all the causes that go together to make positive karma, so that when we come to practice, everything goes smoothly. That's one reason. The other reason is that psychologically we need to balance out. It's not just a matter of realizing emptiness. There's more to it. There is this whole quality of the heart which is put under the label compassion. But compassion here includes generosity, ethical conduct, patience, and so forth, loving kindness. The heart has to open. It's not just a matter of realizing emptiness. Really, it is not. Our Buddha nature is not just empty. It is full of all these qualities of the heart. Loving kindness, compassion, patience. Because we have no ego, we also have no greed, no anger, no jealousy, no pride. So naturally we fulfill ethical conduct. Because there's no ego, there's no self of me and mine. So naturally we are generous. We just, things go through it. Because there is no ego, naturally we are patient and forbearing and understanding. When people act towards us badly, our reaction is compassion. So all of these paramita are the expression of our Buddha nature. And when we recognize our Buddha nature, these qualities are already manifest. But in the meantime, in order to clean the pot of all the tarnish, we need to work on these qualities. That helps to clean it. Not just wisdom. Just wisdom alone is just one wing of the bird. very important to recognize that really, I mean, scholars get very caught up in their ideas, naturally, because they're scholars. That's what scholars do. But if one meets any great scholar, any of these, great geshes and kempos and rinpoches who have not only studied but also practiced, then you see, it's not just emptiness they're talking about. They are just radiating all these other qualities. And they're practicing them. I don't know any, any geshe, kempo or rinpoche worth their name who is not practicing generosity, ethical kindness, patience, loving kindness, compassion, and all these other qualities. Of course they are. They would be horrified if we said, those are not important, right, Rinpoche? Right, Geshe? We don't need that because all we need is wisdom. They would be shocked.
Sometimes I have the feeling, and forgive me if I'm mistaken, that by shortening the definition of emptiness for the new students, and maybe it was said and maybe not, it should all the time be emphasized that emptiness of inherent existence, because emptiness is emptiness, and emptiness of selflessness is a self not inherent existence. It should be really...
You're quite right. Yes. When we talk about emptiness, we don't mean void. We don't mean nothingness. That would be nihilism. Emptiness simply means that nothing, either ourselves or anything outside of ourselves, nothing exists in and of itself. Nothing has self-existence. That means that if we look for the thing in itself, we never can find it. I mean, for example, if we take a human being and we try to say, well, they have a body. Well, where is the bodiness of the body? Then it can keep being reduced down and down and down until you just end up with space and energy. You cannot find the body in itself. It's made up of all the parts coming together, and then we stick a label on it saying body. But we cannot find the bodiness of the body. If we reduce it down and down and down and down and down, there's still nothing you can catch hold of and say, this is it. And likewise in the mind, when we start looking at the mind, we cannot find anything which we can grasp hold of and say, this is mind. Neuroscientists are still looking for it. But you can't find it with a machine. You will never find, however subtle the machine, you can never find mind, because it's ungraspable. And so all it's saying is that everything that our minds, because of the kind of sense organs and the mental makeup that we have as human beings, we project and reify everything. Reify means we make it into a thing. And then we make it into something solid and self-existent from its own side. But if we analyze it, we see that everything comes together in interrelationships and due to causes and conditions, and we cannot find the thing in itself anywhere. I mean, even if you look at this clock and say, okay, what's this? Well, this is a clock. Well, where is the clock? Is it the outer casing? No, that's the outer casing. Well, how about the face? No, that's the face. Well, what about the machinery inside? And then you keep reducing, looking for the clock in and of itself, and it doesn't exist. It only exists as a designation, as a label which we put on a conglomeration of many factors which themselves could be reduced down and down and down and down and down. When all these come together, we put a label on it and say clock. Right?
So children that don't know to speak, so babies that don't know to speak, so how they don't have these labels. So
no, but it doesn't have to be a mental label. Nonetheless, we perceive something. And of course, in the beginning, babies don't even see they see everything as an extension of themselves. It takes some time before they recognize even the idea of something being separate from themselves. And we don't know what babies think, because we forget. But probably in many ways babies might be much closer to reality than what happens when we learn how to differentiate things and stick labels on them.
So it's a matter of language.
Not just language, because people who don't have a language, nonetheless, we project from our mind a certain, a picture which we regard as being separate from ourselves. But language definitely contributes to this sense of separation from everything which is me and non-me. But even if you have no language, still you can, the brain, the way the brain works, it still makes this distinction and creates the sense of something, a solid reality which is just that. That's what it's saying. Emptiness is just simply saying that if you look for the thing in itself, you never can find it. But everything comes together due to many different parts, which themselves can be reduced down and down and down. But when all these parts come together, then we look on it as something which is self-existent from its own side. But it's not, because if you look for it, you can't find it. Right? That's what it's saying. And when it comes to the emptiness of the mind, all it's really saying is that also the mind cannot be found. I mean, if we look for the mind, which is one of the things which people do, it's not something which you can grasp and take hold of. So this is why it's important to keep the mind very open and spacious. That's what it's saying. Is that we make as something solid and real and self-existent ourselves, and then we project all these other real, enduring, self-existent entities on the outside. And because of that, we have grasping at what seems to give us pleasure, and aversion to what seems to give us pain, and therefore we get caught up in this whole cycle. If we can recognize that since the beginning, we do not exist in the way we think we exist, and others likewise do not do so, then that whole grasping aversion cycle will dissolve. And the mind will feel liberated and free and happy. Okay, how are we doing? This is what we're talking about now. So this is also not exactly what we're talking about, but it will do. Can you please elaborate about acceptance, especially about the meaning of this quality? When one accepts himself or herself, how can I accept myself as I am and love myself in my present state when feeling so aspire to reach kindness, awareness, and so forth? Well, the point is always that what we need when we are looking at the mind is to recognize what is going on in the mind. The goodness in our mind and also the negative qualities of our mind, and not to deny that. Acceptance doesn't mean condoning, right? Condoning means that we say it's okay. Rationalizing it. It doesn't mean that. What it means is that we, for example, we see that actually I'm very easily irritated and annoyed when people don't do what I want them to do or say things I don't want to hear and circumstances are difficult. I immediately get upset and angry and irritated and frustrated, for example. Then one sees that. One recognizes, oh look, here I am, upset and irritated again. Right? Okay. So then, rather than suppress it, saying, no, it's bad to be upset and irritated, and good bodhisattvas are never upset and irritated, and therefore either not looking at it at all, or pushing it down and saying, now I'm going to be all loving, kind, and patient, and denying one's true feelings by overlaying them with what one considers to be the right kind of feelings. After recognizing the negative or positive states, whichever, whatever is happening in that moment, then the next thing is to accept it. So, in certain Buddhist schools, you name it. Right? Irritation, anger, greed, envy. Just like, very simple. You're not analyzing it or going into, well, I've always been upset and my mother told me, da da da. Anger, envy. Then, it's already, you see, just by doing that much, it's already cut the stream. Right? Because if one doesn't recognize it, then one gets swept along by it. If one recognizes it and accepts, right now that's how I'm feeling, it's already, it's already put the spotlight on it. And then one decides what to do about it. In accordance with one's abilities. So, of course, very, very, very best. Well, very, 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 very best is that you don't have any negative qualities. But second very best, is that at the very moment of these negative qualities arising, we see it clearly. If at the moment of its arising we see it, no judgments, just seeing, of itself it will transform into a very powerful, positive wisdom energy. This was again one of the brilliant insights of Vajrayana, that the flip side, like a coin, one side, the other side. One side is very negative emotions. The other side of that is a kind of wisdom energy. This wisdom energy has got distorted and therefore appears as a negative emotion. But the source of that negative emotion is a very powerful energy. Therefore, it's considered, some masters say, the more the negative emotions, the greater the wisdom. It doesn't mean that therefore we should all cultivate our negative emotions, but it does mean that one has probably more likelihood of really going ahead on the path if one is a tiger than if one is a rabbit. Because that powerful energy, which might be distorted into very negative energy, if it is transformed, is a very powerful positive energy, a wisdom energy. So therefore, second best, after not having any negative emotions at all, is to be able to recognize the negative emotion as they arise. If at that moment one sees it, one doesn't have to do anything. Of itself, it transforms into a very powerful clarity. But mostly we miss that. And by the time we are conscious that our thoughts are becoming, our emotions are becoming quite negative, we're a little bit down the road. So then we recognize, we accept, we name it, we accept it. Then we have the choice how to deal with it. And so then, for example, if we're feeling angry, we can try, replacing that by seeing this as this person who is annoying us as, oh, thank you very much, you're really a big help, you're so obnoxious. Now I can really practice. And so in this way, one takes that person on the path, or one develops compassion, loving kindness, whatever. But the important thing is the recognition and then the acceptance. It's not suppressing negative emotions. It's recognizing that our negative emotions are our path. The path is about dealing with the negativities in our mind and transforming them into positive emotions. That's how we progress. If we were so perfect, we wouldn't need a path. We need a path because we have all these imperfections, but those imperfections themselves are the opportunity for us to advance. So therefore acceptance is important. And we have to accept ourselves. All right, we're flawed human beings. If we only loved people who were perfect, how many people would we love? So if we accept our family and our friends and we love them despite their weird ways, why can't we do that with ourselves? Why do we have to be perfect before we are lovable? Then nobody will ever love us because we will never be perfect. It will take a long time. None of us will ever have anybody loving us. And we won't love anybody else because they're not perfect either. Since when have we only had to love people who are perfect? So, just as we love others with all their faults and failings, and that's no problem, we love them anyway, so likewise, we have to accept ourselves and love ourselves and encourage ourselves and have compassion for ourselves, just as we would for others. If we cannot do it towards ourselves, then we never can genuinely give it to others, really. Because it's empty. There's nothing empty in the negative sense, nothing in it. How can you share with others what you don't have yourself? So this is why the Buddha always emphasized that we have to give love and compassion to ourselves, because just as we would give to others, we are also a sentient being, and we're the sentient being we are most responsible for. We have to encourage ourselves on the path. When I first met the 16th Karmapa, way back in about 1965, I was just sitting there. I wasn't doing anything, but I was just sitting. And he, after about 5 or 10 minutes, he just turned to me and he said, "Your problem is you don't believe in yourself. If you don't believe in yourself, who will believe in you?" Now, some people might say, well, that doesn't sound very Buddhist. We don't have any self. Believe it. But we all know what he means. And that was Karmapa. So this is the point. We have to believe in ourselves. We have to believe in our own potential and encourage ourselves. Berating ourselves, only thinking about the negative in ourselves, not accepting the goodness in ourselves, is not humility. It's just undercutting our own ability to go forward. I mean, Shantideva says, you know, that there is pride and arrogance, yes, those is an afflictive emotion, but self-confidence is essential for the path. We have to believe we can walk. And so this acceptance of ourselves with all our good points and our bad points is very important. And in this way we encourage ourselves. Yes, this is a failing, this is a problem, I've got to work on this. But the belief that we can work on it, that we can transform, that we can go forward, we don't have to identify with everything which is negative. Because our potential is beautiful. I like this one. This is the best question. That's the answer.
It's like the question you asked the Karmapa, no? You didn't ask anything, you answered.
These are the best questions. Silence. Most of these are not about really what we're talking about here, but so I'll just go briefly through this one because it's nearly time for your yoga. I hope you're all doing yoga and practicing very hard. Maybe that seems to be a bit critical of lines. Most of these, I'm trying to find one which just will take up 5 minutes. None of them are sort of relevant to what we've been talking about. Okay, well this one, can you combine practicing taking the lowest place and leading in whatever beneficial way you are called to lead? Yes, I would say so. I mean, I would say that a perfect example of someone who is taking the lowest place in the sense of being totally more concerned with others than themselves, that you all know, it would be His Holiness the Dalai Lama. because people, when they meet with His Holiness, I mean, and He is a leader, you know, and He sits up on a high throne and everybody listens to what He's saying. But when people meet Him, they are always very moved, even if they only meet Him for a few seconds as He's walking along, and He stops and He looks at somebody, takes their hand, looks at them, smiles. It so completely overcomes them, because in that moment, all that exists for Him is that person. He is looking right into that person with a total non-judgmental mind, which is just filled with compassion and love and acceptance. And even though it only happens for 2 seconds, it can transform someone's life. He's not thinking about himself. How is that person going to relate to me? Look at me, I'm the Dalai Lama. He's not there. He is totally with the person in that moment. The only person that exists in that moment is the person he is in front of. And whether it's a president or just a policeman or whoever it is, he treats him the same. This is why politicians have a hard time with him. Because he's not dealing with, you know, I'm the, you know, sort of head of my organization, or I'm the president or the prime minister or whatever. He's dealing with the person behind the mask. And also you see often religious prelates, you know, religious officials, some of them love him and some of them feel very challenged by the fact that he is looking straight into their heart with love, with compassion, with acceptance. And so at that point you could say he's taking the lowest part, because he's not there as the Dalai Lama, look at me, be impressed. His whole heart-mind is taken up with the person in front of him in that moment. And yes, he leads. He leads. And the other nice thing about the Dalai Lama is that if he makes a mistake, he says, oops, sorry. And right in the middle of 100,000 people, of, oops, I've forgotten, what was that? And he talks to his geshes below to find out where he's forgotten a quotation or something. He's totally, in that way, really, really selfless. He doesn't care about, you know, impressing people. He's totally himself. And because he's himself, then people follow. He doesn't have to force his leadership on anybody. People just want to follow because they can see, here is goodness. So the more we try to embody genuine wisdom and compassion, heart, and genuinely care for others beyond ourselves, the more people want to follow. I mean, you can be, you know, also a lot of charlatans, if they're very charismatic, can also have people following them. But a genuine teacher, when one meets them, one just knows, you know, that they themselves are not promoting themselves. I never, ever, ever met any Lama who said, I am enlightened. Have you ever met a Lama who said they were enlightened? I never did. I mean, all the Lamas I ever met said, I'm just like you, haha. I'm on the path. We're all on the path together. And that's how they see it. You know, we're all working together, walking along. Of course, they're up there and we're down here, but nonetheless, to them, we're all walking together, hand in hand. And then, one has trust in their integrity.
I feel it with you also.
Oh, no. That's your delusion. Not at all. You know, when I sit here, there's this voice inside me saying, what are you going on about? The degree of my ignorance is vast like the ocean, believe me. But there are great beings in this world. There are. Not just Buddhists. I mean, along in all the world, there are real bodhisattvas out there. And if we meet them and we experience their integrity, then we follow. Because, like, you know, we have the security that they will not mislead us. They will not harm us. That they are here for our well-being. Then you don't have to promote yourself. What?